This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys Network. Here's your host, Will Hill.
Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys. Coming up on the show, Kiev O'Neil, our buddy from the Oddsbreakers, will join us. We will discuss the week that was in college football, the NFL. We've got plenty to discuss in both. The college football regular season is somehow over. It is somehow December 2nd. By the time you're listening to this, and I know I say it all the time, man, the season just flies by. Hard to believe it's December, but a lot to get to here. I will start with the NFL, as we usually do on a Sunday. And to me, the big theme is, and anytime you got the Thanksgiving games and then the one game Black Friday, the Sunday slate does take a hit. So it's just a lighter slate on Sunday. But to me, the big picture is the division races. And we'll start with the big game, Ravens-Eagles. Tucker continues to destroy Philly, missed 3 kicks, an extra point, 2 field goals. The second field goal he missed was a long one, 53. I never would have tried it. I had no confidence in him anymore. I know it was like 4th and 6, 4th and 7. It's not like that typical go for it zone. And they're, we're almost telling, hey, they got to be loyal to him. Enough with the loyalty. Loyalty only goes so far. Past performance only goes so far. Tucker has destroyed them. He killed them in this game. They should have been in front. Instead, they're behind. You can't leave 7 points on the board against a team as good as Philly. And now Baltimore loses a game they were favored in, 3-point favorite, and it's the opposite of last week. And Pittsburgh wins a game against Cincy, a game, and enough with Cincy. Cincy's done. We can talk about them in 2025. We don't need to talk about how the talent, they can make a run. Cincy is finished, done, forget about them. But Pittsburgh wins a game. They're an underdog in it. So now it flips where Pittsburgh goes back to having a cushion. They get one of these tough games off their schedule. And Pittsburgh, when these odds reopen, and other division odds are up right now as I'm recording this, Pittsburgh, I'm sure, will be a 2-1 favorite, a sizable favorite to win that division. Baltimore's got their work cut out for them. Easy schedule. They get a bye, then they get the Giants, then they get Pittsburgh at home, which if they have any chance of winning the division, they're going to need to beat Pittsburgh. But Baltimore's in a position now where they're going to almost have to run the table here. Maybe they can afford to drop a game and, hope Pittsburgh pulls off. But Pittsburgh regains control of that division. Tucker was awful. Wilson was really good for Pittsburgh. Threw for 400-something yards. I thought he was finished. I was wrong about that. And Pittsburgh just continues to, be a little bit better than I think. And they are now in control of the AFC North. NFC West is interesting because Seattle wins, Arizona loses. It looked like middle of the afternoon, 3 o'clock Eastern, or at one point, Seattle's down 14 to the Jets. It was 14-0 pretty early. And you're thinking, all right, Seattle's going to lose. Arizona was eventually up 19-6 on Minnesota. And they play next week in Arizona. You figure, all right, Seattle's going to lose. Arizona's going to win. Arizona back in control of that division. Both of those results flipped. Arizona blows the lead to Minnesota. Minnesota, a very quiet 10-2. Man, if it's any other year, they'd be looking at a 1-seeded division title, and who knows? They might still get both. And it felt like they were due for a loss, overdue for a loss, but that team has shown some toughness, some guts. But Arizona blows the game. Looked like they were going to get a touchdown up 3 to put it away. They settle for the field goal. And anytime you go from up 3 to up 6, man, you're asking for trouble, especially against a good offense like Minnesota. Darnold goes right down the field. 4th down, they convert, they get in, and they get a stop. They stop Arizona cold. A couple negative plays. They get an interception to seal the game on 4th down. Even if it was incomplete, the game would have been over. It was 4th and 10. So good win for Minnesota. And Arizona takes a hit. Those Gannon Coach of the Year tickets take a hit. And Seattle is going to be, I would think, an odds-on favorite to win that division. Still can't count out the Rams. And as I'm recording this, Bills 49ers are playing. But Seattle will have a chance to really take that division by the throat next week in Arizona. I think Arizona beats them next week, but a chance for Arizona to gain a game. Instead, they lose a game. So that's one takeaway from Sunday. And the other one, the Bucs continue to gain ground on the Falcons. Look, I'm not a Cousins guy. I've never been a Cousins guy. As a Viking fan, I'll just point out the Vikings were 13-3 the year before they got Kirk Cousins. And it looks like the year after they release Kirk Cousins or move on from Kirk Cousins, they didn't release him. He's a free agent. The year after, they're going to have a similar 13-3 record. So for all the people, Cousins didn't have enough help. Cousins didn't have this. Cousins needs the perfect team around him, and he can't have the perfect team around him. First of all, if you're a great quarterback, and we know he's not that, but if you're a really good quarterback, you don't need this perfect all-star team around him. Oh, it's the defense. Oh, it's this. You can't build that team around him because he takes so much damn money. Cousins was awful on Sunday against the Chargers. 4 picks, one of them for touchdown. He might be washed. Starting to whispers of do you bring Penix in? Can you afford the cap it next year for Cousins? That's a disaster. And Tampa wins a crazy game against Carolina where it looked like they were going to win. Then it looked like they were going to lose. They blow a lead late. Young, who's played really well, give him credit. I'm rooting for him. Young down 4, gets Carolina in the end zone, 30 seconds to go. Mayfield gets them in field goal range. They hit a long kick, and then they kick another field goal in overtime, but it misses, and it looks like Carolina is going to win. But Carolina fumbles when they're in field goal range. Tampa recovers. They matriculate the ball into field goal range themselves, and they eventually hit a walk-off chip shot field goal. So Tampa now they lost head-to-head against Atlanta, but the Tampa schedule, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks when it was 2-1, 3-1. The Tampa schedule, they play Carolina again, and that game is in Tampa. They play the Saints at home. They play the Raiders at home. They get the Cowboys. Tampa's got a pretty manageable schedule. Manageable is putting it lightly. Meanwhile, Atlanta goes at Minnesota next week, like 6-point underdog, and they still have a game at Washington. And Tampa might be in the division lead here in a couple of weeks. I think Tampa, when those division odds reopen, that'll be interesting. I don't know that it'll be a toss-up because Atlanta has the tiebreaker and the lead, but based on the schedule, that is a situation where Tampa is very, very much live to win that division. So a couple of these divisions getting really interesting and some major turning points today where things change and you feel a little bit differently about those division races than you did, 24 hours ago. So again, it's a lighter slate when you have the Thanksgiving games, the Black Friday games, and what the hell we saw on Black Friday with Antonio Pierce and even Andy Reid, who got away with it. First of all, 4th and 2, Andy Reid punts. He doesn't even try to draw him off sides. He just goes up there, punts. They throw a bomb on 3rd and 2 when a first down wins the game. All you need is 2 yards. 2 yards is just as good as 40. That made no sense. And then Pierce, what he's doing, burning a timeout to kick a field goal. Then, the end of the game was a fiasco. Pierce is an absolute disaster as a coach. And man, we saw some bad coaching from Eberflus, who got fired on Friday as I expected. Pierce on Friday, even Reed did some strange things. So, but those games take away from the Sunday slate. It's a lighter slate. You only have the 3 games in the late window. It's a lighter early window. And we get a game here Monday. I don't have a lot of interest. Broncos, Browns. I'd actually take the points. I'm just not in the position here with Denver. I know they've played well. They've exceeded all expectations. They probably win the game, but wouldn't be shocked if they won the game by like a field goal or so. I will take the 6 here with Cleveland. So that's the NFL. The college, I think it's pretty clear for the committee as we head to championship weekend. It is a little strange, man. You go from handicapping 100 of these games a week. That's such a huge card. Now you're down to like 9 games this week, and it's. In some ways, it's depressing. There's mixed emotions. In some ways, it's less to handicap, so it's better. But it's less games to watch. It's less games to bet on, and the lines are tighter too. But I think it's going to be simple for the committee if SMU wins. I think they would put Bama in as the final team, and the tournament would look like this. The playoff, which I'm very excited for, would look like this in no order: Oregon, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, Tennessee, Ohio State. They are all in. The winner of Arizona State, Iowa State is in. The winner of Boise State, UNLV is in. That's 10 teams. If SMU wins, they're the 11th, and I think Bama would be the 12th, and the ACC would only get 1 team in that scenario. Where it gets tricky if SMU loses, you still have your 10 teams that are in no matter what. Those 10 that are listed, they're in no matter what. If SMU loses, then you have Clemson. They would get in. They're not going to be behind the AAC. So Clemson is, I think, I'm pretty confident if they win, they're going to be in. That would leave a 2-loss SMU or a 3-loss Bama. Again, I can't buy this idea that South Carolina is going to get in. I know they're really good. The quarterback's amazing. Their 3 losses are better than Bama's 3 losses. But look, South Carolina, and Bama is Bama. And they played head-to-head, and Bama beat them. So they are not putting Bama. They are not leaving out Bama for South Carolina. It's just not. I'd be shocked if they did that. The question is, if SMU loses, do they still put SMU in, even though they don't have a great schedule, or do they put Bama in? Now, the committee has said, hey, we're not going to punish these teams for playing a conference title game. We'll see. We will see. That would be fascinating. That I would be very interested to see. And the market is telling you the line on Bama to make the playoffs is basically a toss-up, basically what the line is on the SMU Clemson game. So, man, that's the interesting scenario. I think if SMU lost, they would put Bama in ahead of them. But I think it's like 51-49. I don't know. And if that's the case, then Bama's in no matter what with 3 losses. Again, if SMU wins, it's very clean, and they are going to put Bama in. They are going to put SMU in, and we have our 12 teams. It's just that the SMU loss is the curveball with which would give Clemson a win, and Clemson would only get in. Clemson's only playing this game because what Mario Cristobal did, and I got to get a lot of coaching things. The Ohio State coach, which, look, if he doesn't get to a national title, if he doesn't win a national title, maybe if he went to a national title game and lost a heartbreaker. Maybe they bring him back. Other than anything short of winning a title or getting to a title game, Ryan Day is gone because what he did Saturday. You're playing a walk-on quarterback who went 9 of 16 for 62 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. You're at home and you lose that game. How is that possible? Lost 4 in a row to Ohio State. They're a 20-point favorite. Ryan Day is as good as gone. So whether it's going to be Vrabel, whether it's Dillingham or Signetti, I've even heard our buddy Ryan Glasspiegel throw out the idea, hey, would Urban Meyer be interested in coming back? Would they be interested in him? That's probably unlikely, but it's not like Urban Meyer's that old and he's won at college. I knew it's a new era, but Ohio State will be looking for a coach. They deserve to be looking for a new coach. That was just a terrible performance. And what Cristobal did for the Miami coach, what Cristobal did on Saturday, 11-point favorite. They're up 21-0. They unravel. They blow the lead. They're down 7. They're about to tie the game. Of course, his kid gets a stupid personal foul right around the goal line to push them back and set up a situation where, hey, a field goal does you no good, 4-down territory. Except on fourth and whatever it was, fourth and I think it was like 7, he kicks a field goal to cut it to 4. There's like 3.5 minutes left in the game. You haven't stopped Syracuse all day. They kick off. They don't even try for the onside kick. They kick off. Guess what? Shocker. They never see the ball again. Just that's what you got with Cristobal. He's a great recruiter, but my goodness. I mean, first of all, everyone kind of knows, kind of a jerk. That's, I think, well established among college football people that cover the sport. And he is just brain dead, absolutely brainless when it comes to these game management situations. How you kick a field goal there, I don't know. Not on-siding, blowing the 21-0 lead. His teams always choke. His teams always blow big leads. He is a disaster as a coach. And Miami is not going to be in the playoffs. I don't buy it. This idea with 2 losses, they have a chance. I think they are donezo. They deserve to be done in the college football. So a lot of sports this week. If you're watching all these sports, betting all these sports, again, the college basketball starts sometimes 10, 11 in the morning. It goes till well past midnight. Monday is going to feel like sports withdrawal for a lot of people because it just goes kind of back to a normal schedule. The Maui tournament last week where UConn somehow lost 3 games and got destroyed in the final game against Dayton, and they just look awful. That could be an NIT team. Man, they looked bad. But so much of the college football, the college basketball, NFL, just loaded with sports. Kind of need a breather. So excited to talk to Kiev O'Neil. He's been great with this stuff. He gave out Indiana 500-1 to make the playoffs or whatever it was before the season. And they almost snuck into the title game. They lose a tiebreaker with Penn State because with Ohio State losing, man, I actually thought Indiana was live against Ohio State. That was the game I was hoping for against Indiana with Ohio State. And we got it against Michigan finally. Ohio State's just a disaster. Can't run the ball, but Kiev O'Neil's been great. He will join us in a minute here to talk about all of these scenarios, who he thinks is in, his thoughts early on these conference title games, which we have 9 of. So excited to talk to Kev. That is next. This is Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More podcast, and he is back. One of our favorite guests, the odds breakers. It is Kiev O'Neil. Kev, what's going on, man? Fun time of the year. Hard to believe the college football regular season is over, but conference title games are here. We'll discuss those. First off, how's it going? What was a big takeaway from the NFL today?
It's going great, Will. Thanks again for having me on the show. It's one of my favorite shows, as you know, so I really appreciate it. I'll tell you this, there's a couple takeaways in it, and one of them is bye weeks really did not matter, to a lot of these teams. It's funny, a lot of times we, in the past, as handicappers, we look to possibly bet the bye weeks, but the Falcons, the Bengals, the Saints, and the Jets, right? All coming off byes. None of them covered. None of them, The only ones that covered were just recently the Bills, and that's maybe more about the 49ers problems. And the Jags, which was a freaking prayer that happened in that game. But a lot of crazy things. It's like there's a lot of teams outgained and really should have won the game. The Aaron Rodgers throws a pick 6. The Jets had control of that game for most of the game. All of a sudden they blow it. If you look at the box score of the Falcons versus the Chargers, you're scratching your head how the heck Chargers won that game. Well, Kirk Cousins, threw a bunch of picks. It was
lollipops.
Absolutely. What's that?
Lollipops, man. He was throwing pus. I don't know if his arm's bothering him. And I guess some of the next gen stats back it up. And the interception for a touchdown. And look, he's not my favorite guy. He's never been my favorite. He's okay, but man, As a Viking fan, I was not disappointed when he left. That pick six he threw. I mean, it's like basically a ground ball, a shortstop fielded a ground ball where he looks at first, he takes a couple steps and throws. I mean, he stared his receiver down forever, then just floated it and got picked and run back.
Yeah, absolutely. He gets in those problems, but to do it multiple times in one game is unfathomable. I mean, it was almost like doubled in yards is what they had over the Chargers. And then you have the Saints. It's like no business not covering that spread. And they held them scoreless in the first half, and all of a sudden the fourth quarter outscored 14-0, and then can't even get the cover. Then they're all of a sudden they get to the drive into the goal line area and still couldn't punch it in, Will. But that's just their car for you too. It's like you kind of reminded who this guy is playing quarterback over there sometimes. But takeaways from the NFL, just bet on good coaches is I think the thing that you should do moving forward.
What do you do if you're Baltimore with Tucker?
I bench him. I send him down. I know John Harbaugh likes him a lot, and he talked about not doing it. No, I'm doing it. It's been too long now. You're a
Yeah, I agree.
championship team. You cannot risk that anymore. I'm sorry, he was great at one time, but even all great quarterbacks get sent down. I mean, there's times that they get benched all the time, and I think that Tucker is just maybe that Hall of Fame kicker that just lost it. And he's got the yips when it comes to kicking, I
Yeah.
guess, right? And that's very possible. But you can't sacrifice your season because of that. And that's going to happen in the playoffs if they're not careful.
And he might have cost them the division because they won. They lost today as small favorites. Pittsburgh won. They got some ground to catch up, and he's cost them this game. I'm trying to think back. I mean, I know he's missed a million kicks. What led to losses? Oh, the Pittsburgh game a couple weeks ago. That I mean, he left points on the board there. He's going to ruin your season. He is ruining your season. Like maybe you don't cut him, but maybe you come up with a fake injury, or hey, just you're going to take the rest of the year off. You're our guy next year. We got to figure this out. It's not like he's losing leg strength. The leg strength is there. He's just a lot of these were left. And today he finally misses right. Is it the yips? Is it the Chuck Knobloch just in his head? I don't know what it is, but it can't continue. It's like a closer in baseball. He keeps blowing saves. You can't put him out. You got to put somebody else out there. I'm totally agree. I'm shocked. I was shocked he tried that second field goal of 53. I know it was like 4th and 6 or 7. Not exactly like go for it distance, but I didn't think he was going to make it. He's been really, really bad. You can't keep doing it. It's not fair to the rest of the guys on the other team. The rest of the guys on the team are going to start to revolt.
Yeah, I would say so. Someone's got to knock on his door and be like, dude, you just fake an injury. And that's what they do for pitchers too. And pitchers are bad. They kind of, something's bothering them. Something's bothering everybody. So they just get sent to the IL or the DL or whatever you want to call it. Obviously the injury reserve is possible. I would say, bump them down to the practice squad. I'm sorry. It's just a situation that you're sending the wrong message to your team. Nobody is impervious. You are trying to win a Super Bowl. There's been too much, slander on Lamar in the playoffs. You can't sacrifice that. So I agree with you.
Yeah, even if you get a guy who's just like, hey, I don't need you to make them from 55. Just make the ones 40 and in, and we'll live with the rest. And you just be reliable from 40, make your extra points. We got a good rest of the team. But man, I don't know that they'll do it. And they get a bye, then they get the Giants. So the schedule gets easier. And I know they're loyal, but man, that's almost makes them unbettable for me. I can't I can't bet a team where it's just going to line up and miss a kick, miss kicks like this.
There's
Broncos.
a lot of unavailable teams. A lot of unavailable teams for different reasons. And I'll tell you this: the Chiefs hurt their kicker, and they found a good one. The guys did everything.
And another good one. They're on the third string. That kid Wright did well, and Schrader did well after Bucker. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. So they're out there.
Monday night game. Broncos laying around 6 to the Browns. I lean towards the dog here. I think there's a lot of points for Denver to lay. Browns off extra rest. Do you have anything here?
Yeah, I like Denver by at 5.5. There's still a 5.5 at FanDuel right now, so a little difference. I think that Denver's just rolling in Cleveland. That win against the Steelers was a little bit more fraudulent than a true game was. It was a snowstorm game, which we loved, and it was really good eye candy to watch that, as well as watching tonight's game. First half, I was able to pay mostly attention to, not the second half. The Niners versus the Bills, but I think because of the snow and a lot of things being that it's a division game, I think the Browns kind of stood up for one more game, and they all kind of rallied and did that. But that's not going to be the norm here with Cleveland. They still have all kinds of problems in their secondary. They still have all kinds of problems in the linebacker with a Koromora gone. Denver's just playing hot right now. And yeah, it's points, it's points. Normally I'm not a lay the points guy, but I'm kind of a little bit of a believer in Bo Nix now and what Sean Payton's doing over there. And, believe it or not, Denver is one of the most healthiest teams. And it's rare to say something like that in week, 14 now coming into. So this is the end of week 13. I actually like Denver at 5.5. Not really much at 6, but 5.5.
All right, the college. I think the committee will have it easy, somewhat easy, if SMU wins. We know 10 of the teams. SMU, if they win, would be 11. I think with confidence they would put Bama in as the 12th team. If SMU were to lose, that puts Clemson in almost certainly. And then I don't know what they do for the 12th. What's your thought here? Do you agree, disagree with any of that?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think if Clemson wins is the only way that Bama or Miami's out. And you think that is Bama getting over Miami? Yeah, probably. That's the thing. I think Bama will get over Miami, and Miami killed themselves really on that Syracuse game. You look back at the schedule,
Oh,
Miami doesn't have a ton of good wins. The Louisville one did not age that well. The way that they lost was it to Cal a week ago. They've been kind of dropping games they shouldn't be dropping, and the Georgia Tech almost helped the SEC right there, but there's some very, very shoddy officiating at the end of that game. And that's what home field advantage is. It's like, the refs feel it a little bit. They feel the crowd. They don't want to go against them sometimes, and they
yep.
miss some calls, and that's what happened. And it would have been great for the ACC if Georgia Tech won, and it really would have gave Miami a better path to get in. But now I think Miami's going to be the 13th team out as long as Clemson wins. But if um, or sorry, yeah, if Clemson wins, SMU's still in, but if SMU wins, Clemson's out. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I actually thought for the final spot, I don't think Miami has any chance. I was thinking South Carolina, but they're just not going to put Bama. They're just not going to put South Carolina in over Bama because Bama beat them head to head, and Bama's got the brand name. South Carolina, I wish just as a fan standpoint, from a fan standpoint, they'd put them in because the quarterback Sellers is so much fun to watch. The defense is really good. If you look at their loss, I mean, they probably should have beaten LSU. Sellers got hurt. They had some rough calls. They lose by 2 at Bama, which is a forgivable loss. Like their losses are better than Bama's losses, but that's not going to trump the head-to-head, and that's not going to trump the brands.
No, it's not going to trump the bands, but they will not get in the SMU's way. I think by making it to their championship game and doing so well during out the season. I think if Clemson wins, SMU's in and Bama's not, but that's not the way Bama's cheering for it. And hey, Clemson has this. Well, Dabo Sweeney has those kind of championship experience. Does SMU? No. But to be honest with you, Will, I do like SMU plus the points. Now that changed. Now they're laying 2.5, but I did grab SMU this morning. One of my first bets I made at plus 1.5. I think they win by 3. I think 2.5 is probably still out there, and I think it's going to go to 3. So if you like it, but at the same time, if it starts getting past the 3, Will, I have to start leaning Clemson. It's just a situation where you have, coaching pedigree, and you have very experienced guys over on Clemson, and they still have a defense there, and they're not the best team, but I'm a little bit worried about SMU just kind of not having that pedigree at the situation. But yeah, I like SMU until it hits the 3, then I probably have to think the other way.
Okay, so if SMU were to lose, they're sitting there with 2 losses. Bama has 3. You're sure they're not putting Bama in over SMU?
I could never be sure about the SEC. I mean, they're a propaganda machine, as you know. And it's funny. I downgraded everybody in the SEC a little bit. Are they still not the best conference? No, I still have the SEC as the best conference. But to be honest with you, I am not impressed with some of the low floors. The truth is that my power ratings and a lot of people's power ratings out there is high ceilings. Alabama's got one of the highest ceilings in all of college football. If they play a perfect game, they can beat almost anyone, maybe everybody, right? But they also have the low floor that we saw against Oklahoma and against Vanderbilt and against other teams. The low floor is very important because, why should they get rewarded if you just put a big stinker up in the playoffs? I think the talent in the SEC gives them the higher ceiling, but sometimes the coaching mishaps and just, I guess, not getting up for games, I do blame coaching for that, is the lower floor, right? We saw some low floor from Georgia against Georgia Tech. We saw some low floor against Texas when they played Georgia a little bit, and a couple of those wins that they kind of skated by on. Texas now at the end of the season put their pedal to the metal. So I have Texas as one of my top 2 teams now, but there's just too many SEC teams that have proven pretty bad.
How bad, speaking of bad, how bad was that from Ohio State? And who is coaching them next year, barring them winning the title?
I'll tell you this, Ryan Day's gone if he doesn't win the title, in my opinion. I think that was the final straw. If he wins the title, I think that's the only thing that's going to save his job, you
What
know?
I said. I said maybe getting to the title game and like losing by a field goal, maybe they give him a break, but I'm not sure. And anything short of that, goodbye, forget it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a slight chance, but it's going to piss off a lot of boosters and a lot of Ohio State fans if they're not winning the national title. They're not going to care if they lose by 3. The bar just got higher for Ohio State.
Yeah. And what do you think? Rabel, Signetti, Dillingham. Any idea on who the Ohio State coach would, where they'd go for a coach? That's going to be a major, major job, obviously.
Funny how Signetti just signs a multi-year, 8 million a year. They could flip right to Ohio State. Just thinking about that is just so interesting. I have no idea where they go. There's a couple. I didn't think about it really.
Yeah.
Until it happens, it doesn't matter to me. But there's a few candidates out there that they're going to try to get over. Maybe Clemson's sick of Dabo Sweeney and he moves on to Ohio State. I don't know. He hasn't been winning over there lately. There's a couple situations that could actually, bring up. Well, they're gonna get the best out there, right? It's Ohio State. They have the best recruits. They're going to get the best coach out there that's available. I don't see many coaches saying no to that. I mean, the only Kirby's the only one really out there that wouldn't move.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about Dabo. I don't even know if they'd want Dabo because they're such an NIL heavy team. I guess they spent like $25 million on this team. It's not Dabo's way, so I don't know if that's a fit. I don't know. It's fascinating. Let's get into some of these title games. And
Sure.
oh, by the way, before we get to the title games, Bama's still 22-1 to win it all. If you think they're getting in, if you think the committee is just going to give them like, hey, SMU could win, that would put Bama in, or who knows how Bama gets in. Is 22-1 worth it to just put it in your pocket and have that number, you think?
I mean, if you're an SEC fan, they still have a path to go through, and the path is really a money. It's not as good. A money line rollover is not going to be as good as 22-1 either
Right.
because Bama is going to be favored in every game up to at least the semifinals, I would say, right? Is that fair to say? I would say at least, and it just depends upon if they just get lucky and get somebody that sneaks in the semifinals, like in Indiana or somebody like an SMU or something, then they'll be favored in the semifinals. But that's what the playoffs are for, right? We don't know who's going to upset who, and I guarantee there's going to be some sort of an upset in this situation. Yeah, it's a good number if you really believe that Clemson's going to lose that game because if they lose, I think Bama's definitely got the path in.
All right, let's go rapid fire some of these title games. Most of these around right around a field goal. This is winning you're in. Boise State laying 3.5 to UNLV. Any thoughts?
I lean UNLV. I'm mad that I didn't take it at 5.5. I was getting greedy for a 6, but you know what? I just kind of look at it like I want to look a little bit deeper into it. I'm in a survivor right now that I'm waiting to figure out too. I got to pick one of these championship games, and they don't look as sweet as they did like 2 weeks ago, man. Um, I think UNLV, just the fact that they played Boise already, kind of seen what they have. I really like Malik Williams. I think that we're a very well coached team as well. And what's funny about Boise on the Smurf turf? Everyone thinks they have such a big home field advantage. If you really look back at the last 3, 4 years, they haven't covered as much as people think at home, which is really interesting to me. UNLV is going to go in there and they're going to go in there feeling disrespected, and they really were in that game a little bit more than people remember when they faced Boise State the first time. It's a revenge spot too. I'd take UNLV at the 3.5. I didn't do it yet, but that's on my go-to list.
I like the points there too. Arizona State minus 2.5. I would actually look towards laying it or take a money line. I just like Arizona State, the coach, quarterback, running back. I think that's a good combo there. Do you have any opinion on this game?
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago, we just talked about Arizona State plus 380 to
Oh,
win
I
the Big
know.
12 conference, man. I'm glad I took it. I did. I took it because I also needed to because I was like, my Kansas State one wasn't looking so pretty and it proved not to. And I guess, well, Iowa State was the only one I didn't have. Yes, I absolutely do think Arizona State wins this. I am worried about their lack of experience and the fact they do let some people back in the game. They did hurt some wide receivers though just recently, so I'm not like jumping the gun to try and bet this right away. I'm kind of hoping it kind of shades back a little bit. I think that if it gets to 3, there's going to be too many Iowa State backers anyway, and it'll push it back down to 2.5. So no rush for me, Will, but I want to get a little bit more of an injury report, but Scattleboo should be able to run all over Iowa State. I don't like Campbell as a big game championship game coach.
I
He's
agree with
failed
that.
times in that. I think that like Dillingham has got these guys fired up. Levitt's just been a fantastic quarterback this whole year, and he can run the ball. And obviously, Scattleboom, man, what a beast of a running back that guy is. I like Arizona State, but I'm going to wait on it. No reason to rush into this one.
Texas laying 2.5 to Georgia, total 49.
I took Texas right away this morning on the money line. It was one of my
Okay.
larger plays. I took them at minus 120, 122. It's minus 130 right now, so it kind of came back down a little bit. Some Georgia money came back in. Georgia's still banged up, you know. It's almost like if Georgia would have took care of Georgia Tech a lot more, then this should have been closer to a pick 'em game. But now you're not going to get that situation where you can get that wonderful price on Texas. You really have to lay it. But Texas in a revenge spot. Truth is when they first played that first game, Georgia jumped Texas, and then it kind of just filtered out a little bit. Georgia scored a bunch of points. Texas kind of came back. There's everyone throwing bottles on the field and a terrible call. It was a very great game to watch, but I still feel that Texas is the best team in the SEC. But now that they saw Georgia, they can prepare for them and they know what they have coming. So Georgia makes too many mistakes, in my opinion, and Georgia's too injured. So I think Texas wins this game.
Oregon laying 3.5 to Penn State, Big Ten title game, also 49.5.
I'm probably going to get a 3, and I like Oregon more on this. Penn State's just not a big game, uh, school. Franklin chokes too much in big games. You saw it this year against Ohio State, and really, guess what? They haven't played really anybody. It's not like you've seen Penn State, have any competition this year. And I hate to say it as a Big Ten fan, but there's really only 4 teams and a bunch of chumps in the Big Ten. And that's all there is, right? Guess who Penn State just had to play? Ohio State. That's the only one, right? They didn't have to play Indiana. They didn't have to play Oregon. And everybody else under Indiana is just not even worthy of discussing. And that's who Penn State had to play this whole year. And that showed really bad in Minnesota. And don't say that Maryland is any good. They had no quarterback that game. I bet Penn State minus 24.5, but I would still bet Oregon. I'd bet them at minus 3.5. I am Oregon about minus 5.5, minus 6, I think is more of a fair number, but I think I'm going to get a 3, so I'll wait for that one.
Yeah, and man, as somebody who was rooting for Indiana, I thought that Ohio State game that saw against Michigan, I thought if we could have gotten that against Indiana, we could have won. That's the game I was hoping for, expecting for. We just got it a week late because Ohio State couldn't run the ball against Indiana. And I know that people, they dominated left point. That game was not a blowout. That game was a blowout because the punter dropped the punt and then they ran the punt back and the game just got off track. I know Indiana couldn't move the ball either, but Indiana had a chance to seal that game if they, just a break here or there. The game should have at least been closer, I think is a fair way to put it.
Oh, absolutely. And Ryan Day just punching the ball in when he was in victory formation. Oh, that was Bush League crap. And that made me happy that he lost to Michigan after pulling that. Just that was a misleading final score. Oh, there's also a very bad call on what should have been an offsides calling a
Yes,
false start.
absolutely.
That changed things too. That was a massive thing for Ohio State. It's like, dude, you only saw one guy go, and it was the defensive guy going through the guy, and then you have a conference and call, knowing that nobody saw it, and then you call a false start on Indiana. That
100%.
was BS to me too.
And the D lineman in that game, we're talking Ohio State, Indiana a couple of weeks ago, a couple of Saturdays ago. The D lineman didn't even argue or point at the other guy. He just kind of put his hands on his hips and he's like, man, I know I did it. And then they gave it to, they gave him the call. And at that point, Indiana had the lead. They had the ball and the game, got off track after that. But we're just getting upset talking about this. Last one, you hinted at it, Clemson, SMU. You like SMU here, who's laying 2.5. I woke up this morning, checked the line. It's like a pick 'em. Maybe they're getting a point, and you blinked and they were laying 2.5. So somebody came in on SMU and came in on them hard.
Probably being a few others, man. It's funny. I saw Jeff Benson post the odds, and Circa was laying a +3, and I messaged Jeff right away. I'm like, I wish I was in my Vegas right now and use the money I had there because I would have slammed SMU at the +3. I put it at +1.5 on the books that I'll be able to use here in AZ land. But no, SMU is a much better team in my opinion than Clemson. I think it should be at least at 3. The pedigree of Clemson is what makes me worry a little bit. From a power rating standpoint, I have SMU -3.5 ish, kind of. I think that SMU should be definitely a pretty significant 60% plus favorite in this situation. SMU is the best team, most well-rounded team in the ACC, and I think they deserve to make it. I think I know somebody that has a nice little 30-1 ticket on SMU as well, Will. So congrats
I wrote,
about that one.
I wrote SMU up in the summer 16 to 1. So, and then they lost the first game and they were losing the second game or vice versa. I was like, man, that ticket's dead. So, yeah, that was one where you just look at the schedules and they have a shot, and the schedule got even easier because their tough
Yeah.
games, quote unquote, were Florida State and Louisville, and they both ended up, we know how that went. Do you find this interesting? We could have all these conference champions being new teams and new leagues, like SMU in the ACC, Oregon in the Big Ten, Texas in the SEC, Arizona State in the Big 12. Is that something? Nothing? Is that just random?
It's surprising because normally, when teams joined new leagues, I tend to want to fade them.
Me too.
But yeah, I mean, everything bounced the right way for a lot of these teams. And Oregon's really in great position, but you also have to look at Oregon and say, they benefited from a very easy Big Ten schedule too. They didn't have to play Penn State. They didn't have to play Indiana, and they played just Ohio State at home, right? So it's like they got to play a bunch of chumps. I mean, if you remember, not too far away, Boise State almost beat them. If you look at the Idaho game,
I know.
Idaho actually, they go to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's a really bad team. And Wisconsin shouldn't have been in that game. So there's no perfect or Oregon. There's no for sure that they're the best team in the land right now either, man. I will say that Oregon should be the number one seed, especially if they beat Penn State because of what they did. They showed that their floor is higher than the SEC teams,
Right.
but nobody's safe, Will, and that's what makes college football so special this year.
Last one. Forget the odds. Just life on the line, salary on the line, whatever. Who wins the national championship?
Texas.
Okay. Well, you know, I haven't been high on them, but I was just thinking like they are kind of flying under the radar especially for Texas, where it's like, man, we don't really talk about them. I think the Georgia game leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. So look, this is not a typical year, obviously, because we have the 12-team playoff as opposed to the 4. But man, there is no 2019 LSU or 2022 Georgia or 2020 Bama. It's just these teams are all good. Even last year, I just think the talent is starting to really spread out, thin out here with this NIL and the portal and all that.
Yeah. And it's like it's tough. I had to pick one. I wish I didn't have to, but I'll pick Texas. And I just see too many offensive line problems with Ohio State. I had Ohio State top of my power ratings until I saw them just get bowled around a little bit on the trenches against Michigan. And Howard made some bad throws, and nobody's impervious, man. It wouldn't shock me if Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, or Alabama or Georgia wins it, man. Those are the 5 teams that I think are going to win it. And sorry, Arizona State, I love you. Sorry, Indiana. Just make the playoffs. And that's what we wanted in the beginning of the season, like we discussed. And sometimes we make these bets, Will. It's not that you really believe that they're better than a lot of teams, but you look at the schedule, you look at the situation. I knew the Big Ten was bad except for a bunch of teams, and I know Indiana only played one of them, right? And you say, well, they can get in. It's like a perfect situation that Indiana doesn't have to play the conference championship because they don't have to get another loss now, right? And that's why, these bets are wide open to make. And it was such a great call with SMU. The good news is that SMU, I think, is in either way, even with the loss. But Indiana's in because they don't even have to play in the Big Ten championship.
And I think Indiana is still scoring somewhere against Purdue, still lighting up the score. Man, that was ugly. I saw somebody, Jeff Schwartz, I do the Fox Pod with, sent me something. He's like, on the live line, Indiana has the ball on their own 1. And on those live drive props, they're -115 to score a touchdown. I said, man, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
It's just absolutely insane. Yeah, that was just too easy. And Purdue lost their coach, obviously. They're going to be moving on themselves, and well, a little bit overdue for Purdue. But the truth is that with the transfer portal and the NIL, it's not like I used to be say wait 3 or 4 years on this coach. Now it's like you got 2 years, buddy. Get it fixed. Get the
Yep.
transfers in, and we talk about Ohio State's new coach, but you're right about Dabo. He's got to switch his mindset if he wants to keep up with the Joneses.
Kev, you're the best, man. Let everyone know where they could find you. Appreciate you coming on.
Oh man, it's been a blast. Check us out at theoddsbreakers.com. We will have a podcast with misleading box scores. We're going to talk a little bit more about these games that we just touched on with Will and a couple of the smaller games. Ohio, Miami, Ohio, Army, Tulane, a couple of those games, and obviously some NFL as well. Will, really appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate the time, man. I'm sure we'll be doing it again soon. Thanks for coming on. All right. Thanks to Kiev O'Neil. Rate, review, subscribe. We will be back Wednesday. See you then.